Hi Gearslutz. I'm Klaus from Bitwig, and I'm going to show you what we have new this year on NAMM. So we had a strong 2019 where we first announced the grid, and then in the summer we actually released it. So I'm going to show you that, along with some other things that were new in a subsequent point update, the 3.1 update that included micro pitch device, few new modules and modulators, other timeline features. And for Christmas, we released a surprise vocoder. So that's what we have new for this year. Big for us last year was the release of the grid, which we released in summer-ish. Can't remember exactly the date it was finally released. But it's our modular environment inside Bitwig Studio. It contains of two different devices, the polygrid, which is a polyphonic, or monophonic if you prefer, a synth device where you can freely build your own structures using what we call modules. There's also a variant called the FX grid, which works the same way except that your input is audio signals instead of notes. And it consists of 160 modules to this point. And the key features for it is really that it sets a new bar in terms of usability and workflow, that it's really quick to create sounds. So we want to grow this market of people that can actually use a modular environment to not be too limited to the very interested ones, but to something that more normal users could use. That users that are already familiar using like a subtractive synthesizer, but they feel like complex systems more a bit off-putting because they're so big and complex. So a key feature was the whole workflow, that it's simple to use. One key feature is just to get rid of a lot of clutter. We introduced the pre-chord system, which basically means that certain signals that you commonly use, like gate signals or pitch signals, they're already pre-routed from the device input. So in this patch, there's no inputs going to the triangle or the envelope, but they still play and follow the pitch. Also, the system is polyphonic, so you can just build a complex synthesizer and you still get polyphony for it. There's no problem. And there's a lot of gestures to make it really quick to use. Let's say that I want to layer this oscillator with something else. I can just drop in the sawtooth, drop it on the port, hold down a modifier, and it automatically insert this blend module. So now I have two oscillators that I can fade between. And all the signals within the grid, they use 4 times oversampling, so you have quite a lot of bandwidth to play with in terms of doing phase modulation and things like this before you get aliasing. But they are also stereo, so in this case I can actually detune the left and the right channels of the oscillator separately. So if I do this, we'll hear one of the oscillators start speeding. And if I just want to continue building a classic subtractive synth structure, I could just drag in a few modules, the low pass here. Maybe I want to add an AD envelope to the low pass. I drop that on the port. That was one port. And if I want to change the envelope to be a different type, I can right-click to it. So we really focused on trying to make it as quick and easy to use. And another feature that really shows this off is the help view, where you can see interactive help for all the modules as the actual inset that's used. So I can actually tweak this while I'm reading the help, and if for some modules even the set of parameter changes, but the help we will dynamically update along with it. In the grid, like all the Bitwig devices, we also support voice stacking, so you can actually take these polyphonic paths and then even layer it more times. We added so that polyphonic processing is now fully multi-process capable in Bitwig. So you actually, if you have many cores in your processor, it will actually distribute along with them for each voice. And yeah, there's simply a lot of things you can do. We do have a few more complex modules, like for example the sampler. It's the same kind of sampler engine that exists in Bitwig Studio, so I can even load in multi-samples in here, use them along with the different sampling engines. We have the cycles and the textures engine from Bitwig Studio. So there's a lot of things you can do in here. So, what's new is this help view that we introduced. It's also available in all the devices now. So it's easy to get started. If you have any questions like how something works, you just click show help and you get a nice explanation of how all the devices work. This is, of course, continues the tradition that we have with our modulator system that works in conjunction with the grid. So I can still use an LFO as I used to and modulate inside here, but you of course also have new modules with modulation slots also within the grid. So depending on if you need to interact with the modules, you can choose which environment you want to use them in. 3.1 also introduced a new micro pitch device, which allows you to do microtonal adjustments inside the chromatic scale. So one classic example would be if I have a sound like this. Let me first just turn off all the beating. You probably don't get so good audio, but if it was better audio, you would actually hear that there's a slight beating between the primary note and the fifth, because they're not tuned to a perfect mathematical ratio. If I then load one of the scales where this is different, let's say Johnston is kind of fun, you will hear that this is a much purer tone. Let's get rid of the LFO. That is completely static, versus if it's off, the chromatic scale would actually give you this sort of like beating effect similar to detuning oscillators. So microtuning can be used for this kind of subtle changes, which is kind of useful if you're playing organs or anything. Or you can do more dramatic effects like scale that gives you a different feeling. So it's capable of setting all the 12 tones in the scale, but you can also change like how big one octave is. So there are like, you can do quarter note scales with this as well. So, and for Christmas, we released to the users a new vocoder, and it's a nice sounding vocoder with up to 80 bands, 2 different filter types, can work in stereo, but the main feature is that it just fits into the Bitwig ecosystem so well. Traditionally, you also always have the issue that you have 2 signals that you need to combine in a way. It's sort of like a spectral multiply, if you will. And getting 2 signals in a DAW into something is always hard. It's like you have the modulator and the carrier signals, so you either need to sidechain it in, or a lot of plug-in vocoders, they have their built-in sound sources. But we have kind of the philosophy that we want to try to keep individual parts as simple as possible, but allow you to do complexity by combining different set parts of the program. And that's why we just offer 2 different chains. So in this case, you just have the polysynth generating the audio inside the carrier channel, and it actually receives notes from a different track. So all I needed to do here was to route the note data to the vocoder track, and then the vocoder track I actually have both signals in parallel, the audio being down here and the notes being up here, and you can actually then have different presets with different sounds on them. So it makes that routing quite a bit easier. So that's been a very nice year for us, so we're going to continue and improve the software, and it's going to be exciting to see what comes next. Okay. We also introduced a new version of Bitwig Studio called Bitwig Studio 16 track. It is a future limited version of Bitwig Studio, which is available for only $99. So it's a quick way of getting into Bitwig Studio for a little bit less money. If you want to learn more about Bitwig Studio 3, 3.1 and so forth, go to bitwig.com and download the demo, and you can try it out yourself.